As Paul Simon wraps up his farewell concert tour, he's also releasing a new album of old songs, which may be a sign of things to come. My review of In the Blue Light is coming up next on Track by Track. Hey everybody, my name's Kyle, and this is Track by Track, music reviews, news, and commentary. Thanks for tuning in today, and if this is your first time here, please take a second to click subscribe so that you won't miss future reviews and more. There seems to be a kind of late career rite of passage, so to speak, that's becoming more and more common, where legacy artists revisit their catalog with revision and reinterpretation in mind. Sometimes the result is dramatic, like Peter Gabriel's orchestral reinventions on his 2011 album New Blood. Other times the results are fine, but you wonder a little bit, what was the point? That's kind of how I feel about Suzanne Vega's Close-Up series, where she re-recorded the songs in more stripped-down acoustic arrangements that, to my ear, didn't take a strong enough departure from the folky originals. The latest classic artist to take a revisionist approach to their catalog is the legendary two-time Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee, Paul Simon. In the Blue Light finds Simon recording new versions of 10 songs from his solo career. Interestingly, and perhaps wisely, Simon has avoided making this a greatest hits sort of affair. I'd venture a guess that most casual Paul Simon fans may only immediately recognize 2 or 3 of the songs on the track list, if even. None of the singer's most iconic compositions have been selected, nor has anything from his landmark album Graceland. As a result, there's far less baggage attached to the music, which helps give these new arrangements a little more room to breathe. Now, admittedly, I wasn't familiar with most of the songs here, so I put together a playlist of the originals to listen to before digging into the new versions. I'm not necessarily going to recommend that approach, listening to the originals first. I don't think you necessarily need to do that before hearing In the Blue Light. You'll be fine either way. That being said, I do highly recommend that you do, at some point, seek out the original recordings. I personally really enjoyed exploring Paul Simon's lesser-known music of the past, and I think you will too. As for the new arrangements, Simon is leaning more strongly in a jazz direction on this album. That's no surprise, really, when you look at the roster of musicians backing him up here, including Wynton Marsalis, Jack Giante, and Bill Frisell. From start to finish, that approach works perfectly well and makes for an enjoyable listening experience. The odd thing, though, is that none of it feels like a significant departure from the originals. Now, that's a credit to the quality of Paul Simon's songwriting, really. Even if the original versions of these songs weren't technically jazz, the elements were still there. But in a way, that's also a bit problematic. The songs on In the Blue Light rarely feel like they've undergone a truly significant transformation. To use the example I mentioned earlier, the album tends to lean more to the Suzanne Vega end of the spectrum than to the Peter Gabriel end. But again, this is where Simon's choice of more obscure songs for this release plays to his benefit, and likely yours. For many listeners, these will essentially be new songs. With that in mind, there's definitely some real standout tracks on this set. Straight away, on One Man's Ceiling is Another Man's Floor, Simon sets the jazzy mood with what may well be my favorite song on the album. And by the way, somebody needs to send this one over to Van Morrison, because he could do an awesome cover version. And if you're a fan of Van's recent jazzy output, you know exactly what to expect here. Other highlights include the beautiful How the Heart Approaches What It Yearns, presented here with a quartet accompaniment that sounds as if it could be recorded in a jazz club. Some Folks' Lives Roll Easy gets a similar treatment, albeit with a more sparse studio recording. And on Pigs, Sheep, and Wolves, we get a New Orleans-style jazz on a song that lyrically sounds more apropos today than it might have when it was originally released in the year 2000. In addition to the jazz instrumentations, Simon plays with new string arrangements on several of the tracks. The best of these is Can't Run But, with its staccato strings and woodwinds. The rhythm is so propulsive that it's easy to overlook the fact that there's almost no actual percussion on the song. Then on Renee and Georgette Magritte with Their Dog After the War, the classic song originally from 1983 takes on a cinematic character befitting of the storytelling and the lyrics. Ironically, it's the already cinematic quality of those lyrics that makes the new orchestrations almost unnecessary. There's no true low points on the album, no wrong turns, so to speak, but I do find that 3 of the more guitar-based songs have a harder time holding my interest. On The Teacher, Simon sounds as if he's covering one of Sting's deep album cuts that you tend to forget about. And I think you'll forget about this one too. Similarly, the song Love doesn't really linger long after it ends and is probably the weakest song on the album. And finally, your mileage may vary on Darling Lorraine. This song literally tells the story of a lifetime for a couple growing old together. And for me, it feels like it takes a lifetime as well. I wasn't a big fan of the original version either, but I did enjoy its African rhythms. Now those are gone in the new recording, which opts instead for more subtle jazz percussion, oddly accented on the chorus with a couple bursts of sound effects that feel out of place and completely out of character on the album. Interestingly enough, all 3 of these songs originally appeared together on the album You're the One, an album I do have in my collection, but almost never return to. So, In the Blue Light is a bit of a mixed bag. I really enjoyed about half the songs, particularly the ones with the most jazz-influenced instrumentations. The other half of the album is fine at best and fine at worst. There's songs that kind of fade into the background and don't do much to grab and hold your attention. Supposedly, Simon recorded several other songs that didn't end up on the album, which kind of makes me wonder what we might be missing. But the truth of the matter is we may be hearing those songs and more revisited music in the future. The reason? Paul Simon has announced he is done writing songs. That's a real shame if you ask me. I thought his last album of original music, Stranger to Stranger, was one of the best albums of 2016. It could well be that his latest album is a sign of things to come, and that Simon's music from here on out may be just covers of himself or of others. I'm willing to see where that path leads, but if he does manage to rediscover his songwriting mojo, I'd be quite happy to hear that output as well. As for this current re-examination of his catalog, I'm giving In the Blue Light by Paul Simon an X rating of 6 out of 10. There's enough undiscovered gems here, backed by strong guest performances, that it is certainly a worthwhile listen. But so are the originals. One way or another, sooner or later, be sure to check those out. Once again, my name is Kyle, and this has been Track by Track. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Plus, check out some of these other videos below that I think you might also enjoy. And of course, be sure to subscribe, because true music fans always want new releases the day they come out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.